Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
This episode is brought to you by Founder Catalyst. If you're raising funds and you need to get yourself SCIS and EIS advanced assurance and you need some help with that, then stick around to find out how you can get 5% off of Founder Catalyst's services.
Thanks for having me, Greg. I'm Alper. I'm a go-to-market advisor and a former founder myself. I co-founded Flowland and raised and exited that very recently. Previously, I worked at Bain and Accenture as a consultant. That's how I started my career. Then went on to be a sales and go-to-market leader in Series A to D startups, where I generated over $50 million in revenue. And currently, what I'm doing is I'm now supporting other founders who are on the same journey of building from 0 to 3 million. I generally work with pre-seed to Series A startups and founders. I complement their team as a co-founder, as a service, or a fractional advisor. And that's what I enjoy doing. And my goal is to help 100 startups in the next few years and to see them grow.
Great intro. And you listed a lot of reasons why I wanted to chat to you as well.
Great. I'm glad I've done the job for you.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. No, listen, man, it's great to see you again. And thanks so much for jumping on today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, loads of things I want to chat to you about and ask you about. Before we dive into kind of like the meat of it, tell us a bit more about, tell me really a bit more about Flowland, because that's a really interesting concept. I mean, I know there's other very similar concepts out there as well.
Yep.
Like, for example, I'm very familiar with Trumpet, which is a kind of a similar example. But how did that come about? What was the story of you sort of co-founding that?
Yeah, of course. The story of me co-founding that and the story of what the product is are two different stories. I'll start with the product, which is probably more interesting to the listeners. So Flowland now, by the time we were starting to build it, there wasn't a very common name for the product, but now there is. A lot of people call them digital sales platforms. And the idea behind that was I've been in sales for over a decade and closing large, complex deals, mostly enterprise. The last 5-6 years, it's been more SaaS and high velocity, lower ticket size as well. But anyway, so for me, the idea as a sales and go-to-market person was, can we have one single place where the buyer and the seller come together and they can close the deal in a much frictionless way than what we're used to, because 50 stakeholders, 100 documents, you have to review things, you use Jira, Google Docs, Slacks, and whatever. So my idea, joining my co-founders who are the tech and product people, was to smoothen that process, to solve my own problem. And the way the category is now shaping up, obviously with the advent of AI, there's a lot of automation and AI-driven workflows coming in. It's becoming a bit more like a Zapier for sales and customer success team. So if X happens, do Y. We're very used to that from the outreach world, the world of lead generation, where if somebody, checks out a document, send them this, etc. Now we're bringing that more to the world of sales and customer success, where there's a lot of for complex products especially, you have to go through 50 different items with your buyer. From the moment the sales conversation starts to onboarding them, activation, etc. So you can do all of that in one platform is the idea with Flowland.
Yeah, I've heard them described before, as well as microsites. And I think that was a really early description I remember hearing.
That was a very early description, and it was a very BD.
I was so confused by it.
Yeah, it was a very BD-related description as well. I think early on what caught everyone's attention, not very rightfully so, and still it's a good future for a lot of people, is you put some documents, you can see how the prospects are engaging with what you're sharing with them, how much time they're spending in each one. So some early users are still using it in that way. I did a webinar last week with one of our early users, Rob Cousins from Scribe, which is also very he works with startups all day, every day. And he still uses it as after the first conversation, he'll send the link and he'll make sure that people are looking at the right things in the right order. But a lot of our more recent users, more complex cases, are using it for automated workflows to make sure that the deal is going through the right pipeline and following the right steps so that it can be closed, and then furthermore the client can have a better onboarding experience.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's funny. I've had Nick, co-founder of Trumpet, on the show. before. And it was a really funny story because I said to him, I don't know if you remember, but very, very early on when you guys were starting, you emailed me and asked me, because I must have done a lot of market research, emailing head of sales, which I was at the time, and asked me what I thought. And I wasn't very nice. I was like, this sounds like, I don't get it. Like, this sounds like such a stupid idea. I speak to my, you know what I mean? I speak to my prospects. Why would I send them this? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I just didn't get it. And now I use these kinds of solutions all the time. It was quite embarrassing. He was like, no, I remember you. I was like, oh shit.
All right.
Yeah, he was like, but it was useful apparently, to even be a bit of a descending voice.
I think early on when you're building the product, so for me, the first 400, 500 conversations were I was putting my sales head out and putting my product head back on, because saying things are stupid, etc. You have to take it with a pinch of salt, but you need to make sure that, like, why is someone saying it's stupid? Right. So let's eliminate the stupid out of the way. So any feedback is good feedback when you're building.
Absolutely, and it comes down a lot of it to messaging, right? So you've got to look internally. Well, did we explain it correctly? Are we touching on the right pain points, etc.? And I think that's ultimately that's pretty much what he said.
That is very difficult, but right now, like so I work with very early stage. Some of my co-founders I work with right now, I advise or I do some fractional work. They're very early stage at that, like positioning, messaging, message market fit, and always explaining it in their language. And I'm always trying to push the boundary with them. Like, can you please make sure that you explain it in the language of your buyer or the potential buyer? Because I don't like, people say, oh, your name is Alper, right? And I'm like, I don't care how you pronounce my name. As long as, this relation is going somewhere, I'm happy. Like, you can call me whatever you want. You call me an apple, And obviously it's a bit exaggerated, but it's the same with your product. You don't care how you can't put the words in people's mouth. It should be the opposite, especially in the early stage. Like, you're constantly trying to understand, like, what's the 10-second way people explain your product. And when that happens, you're going to be selling fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a very similar job in that regard, right? I'm a fractional CCO too, and I do go to market advisory work with early stage founders and all sorts. So we do similar work in that. I would suspect you probably do it much better than me. But yeah, and messaging is the thing that can take a very long time, to get nailed down. And I think this is actually, at least from my perspective, I think probably the most frustrating part of the job, because actually there's a complete misunderstanding by a lot of early stage founders of what it means to hire a go-to-market expert, in that they think that you're going to come in and you'll be selling next month, right? And it's like, actually, no, you need to do the work. Like, it's like a personal trainer, really. It's like, no, like you're going to have to put in the work here, buddy. You know what I mean? And the messaging is usually the thing that I've found that is quite often the thing that needs the most work. And you can't start, at least I can't start implementing all of the other stuff until we've nailed that first. We need to put some time into that.
Well, what I try to do is, right now at least, I'm very hands-on because I've been through the same exact journey. And I know that, for example, sometimes I'll ask, before we do any outbound campaign, anything mass at all, I'll sometimes ask the founder to give me their LinkedIn, and I just want to, do the first outreach manually the way I used to do, because the conversation just flows much better in that way. And as a founder, one of the key learnings for me was, like, you have to figure out something first yourself as the founding team, as the founder, as the co-founder. And now when I'm working as co-founder as a service, I do everything with the mindset of, if this was my company where I had the majority equity, how would I work to make it a success? And in that mindset, I think it's much easier because I get my hands dirty, I do the work for a few weeks, I figure out what needs to happen. Then if they have a resource internally, I'll tell them, like, this is how you automate, once you start sending your messages, Slack them to me, let me check. I'm very hands-on in that regard because I think the early stages where you can gain, like, a very unfair advantage in terms of time. If you know how to do the things right, then that 1 month can be spent really smartly, and it can save you the next 6 months of probably failing with a lot of your outbound, with a lot of your initial go-to-market.
Yeah, absolutely. How did you get into sales?
Great question. I think I was really bored of being a consultant and sitting in front of a computer doing a lot of analytical work. So I started as a Bain consultant, and I went to Accenture. It was always strategy work.
Right.
I was actually, advising sales teams of, like, Pepsi, Mondelez, like large sales organizations. And I really like the idea of a salesperson going out there and talking to clients, etc. And as I moved towards like senior management in consulting, I started selling more, becoming like, I think a partner at a McKinsey is a very smart and maybe a little bit like too pampered salesperson, because their goal is to actually sell the projects. And I really like that aspect. So I found a niche in Accenture where I was actually leading a small team of salespeople, and we were selling consulting services to NGOs and United Nations, etc., which is something that I was passionate about at the time. So that's how I got the first experience. And as I liked it, I said, okay, I'm going to go and be a full-time salesperson. I tried to figure out, and my first job, I was in a company called Mind Gym, which is a behavioral science-based training company. And our job was to basically change the behavior in terms of D&I, ethics, performance management in companies like, S&P 500 companies, finance, consulting. So very large, complex deals, trying to sell like $1 million of consulting or training to these companies. That was my first education. And I worked with a founder who was my first boss, who was a very interesting character, where I learned a lot about selling from him.
And then you caught the bug, I assume.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I really liked, I think it's so funny now, my whole journey of, like, a lot of people ask me, like, why don't you continue to be a co-founder in your own startup, where I'm still a, big equity holder, and I'm an advisor there, and I'm doing a lot in terms of, like, making that a success, because I have still a big stake in the success of the company. But I do enjoy being a bit of an independent person in that, sales, I think, gave me the independence to own my own business. Like, I think as a salesperson, you have your own territory, your own goals, your own things. Obviously, the company is hopefully giving you a lot of support rather than just being like every week checking out how you're doing. And I really enjoyed that. And I think sales gives you that, obviously, external facing, being an extrovert, being in events, talking, pitching. All these things are cool, but also like owning your own destiny. This is your target. You're going towards that. And then in my sales leadership, I've done that with like running teams. Then I was a go-to-market leader for Series Seed and Series A, and eventually doing it for my own startup from 0 to 1 for the first time. And now, even like just very recently, I decided to be an advisor, and I'm doing fractional work. Now, again, I have to, actually, it's so funny, like for the first time, I really have to sell myself, rather than sell anything else. Then you become the product.
Do you find that harder than anything else that you've had to sell?
Yeah, for sure. It's
yeah,
like
good.
The
I'm not alone.
No, it's the hardest, worst thing ever, because, like, I don't know why. I think it's a bringing up thing, but I think it's the hardest to sell yourself, which is why I think the best selling is inbound. Like, just put out there what you know, what you've done before, and hopefully someone will start coming your way. But of course, you always have to do outbound too.
Yeah, it's funny because in my experience, I mean, it's the same issue with myself, and in my experience in doing a lot of sales hiring over the years, some of the best salespeople have been terrible at selling themselves. Like, it's actually the ones that are very good at it that have actually caused me to raise red flags. I'm like, weirdly, do you know what I mean? There's always been a correlation there.
I do.
Yeah.
And I think some of the most successful salespeople I know have always been the ones who will potentially suck at selling themselves because they're very empathetic. They always listen. They always care about the other side, empathy, curiosity about your client, analytical thinking about their problems, solving their problems, putting yourself in their shoes. These are the traits that I think really make at least consultative selling really cool and interesting for me.
I think there's a correlation I've definitely seen it quite a few times of those that are extraordinarily good at selling themselves tend to not be very good at maintaining a client base
or delivering.
Good at initial acquisition but terrible at retention, because they're very good at convincing people, and that isn't and I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of sales anyway. So I think that's maybe why they're so good at selling themselves. I think there's like some sort of psychological ego wrapped up thing happening there where they're like really good at just basically manipulating people into saying yes, but then not so good at underlying what the value is long term.
And I don't think you can put like an umbrella sales term, like every industry, everything is different. I think there's a lot of like, when you say like salesman, I'll say, not even salesperson, because this is where the stigma comes from. Everyone thinks about like the real estate sales or recruitment sales or
car sales.
Like car
Everyone
sales,
thinks car salesman,
which is volume and like shake hands, be super aggressive and etc. Whereas the sales format I come from is very consultative. It's like I'm not selling something that is like a $50-$100 item, and I'm claiming to solve a $1 million, $2 million problem. That's where I come from initially, and I think the ticket sizes for me have gone like lower and lower. Yesterday I was actually talking to a founder, and he's like, "What's the smallest thing that you sold?" And because he's doing something for like 1 to 10 people, SMBs.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
And like probably the smallest ticket size I've ever sold is my own startup, which is Flowland, which is like, you can buy it as low as $50. But coming from that complex large enterprise to like high velocity, almost like B2C, type of sales, your mindset shifts and you'll learn a little bit more like the car dealership sales styles as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually had a guy who was an ex-car dealership salesman and leader on the show, and then he went on to build a SaaS platform for car dealerships. Funny enough, and he and I talked about that for a long time, about the reputation, let's say, that these people have, and he was like fully in agreement. He's like, oh yeah, it's a huge problem. Like the egos and the complete lack of awareness and lack of process and stuff and it does give salespeople a horribly bad reputation. But and I think I've done a similar thing to you. I think I started my career high ticket selling and gradually got lower and lower. And I've often wondered if that's the right direction. I don't know, but we'll see.
I think for me definitely was, but I mean, the lack of awareness is something that's really interesting that you mentioned. I think that lack of awareness, you needed a little bit, like too much of awareness. Self-consciousness is not good because that
can be crippling.
Syndrome.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the middle, I think. Like.
Yeah. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, right?
Yeah.
But what would you say is kind of on that note? I guess what would you say is the sort of key difference between sort of a good salesperson and a great salesperson?
I used to say these traits in a different order. I think now I changed my mind after all these years. First and foremost is resilience. I used to say curiosity, empathy, and those things before, but it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. You have to have the stamina to endure, and you have to be able to just always bounce back, have that one hard day you're not closing something, you were so close to closing and then it didn't happen, and etc. Those things can really break you, and I think a lot of people need breaks in their careers when those things are occurring. Like in sales, I think you have the peaks and the lows, unless you're selling like a monopolistic product maybe. So I think resilience,
unless you're selling ChatGPT right now.
that is true. I think like I maybe take curiosity and empathy as given traits that you have to definitely have, because then you will ask the right questions to peel the onion, as they say, or uncover the issues that will help you to sell bigger deals. Empathy, because the customer or client comes first. Those are given, but the trait that actually makes you strong in the long run and endure is resilience.
It's interesting you say that, because that's a common attribute that a lot of people would also say a good founder needs to have as well. And
a good founder is a good salesperson, definitely.
Right, and that's it. And that's kind of the point I was driving at, I guess, is that you were mentioning how there's essentially a great salesperson kind of embodies the entrepreneurial spirit earlier, and vice versa. I think a great entrepreneur embodies a great salesperson spirit too. Ideally, it's not always the case. You can have obviously co-founders where where that isn't applicable, but it can be complementary. But I think some of the strongest founding teams I've seen have been those that all have a certain level of those skills actually together, because then regardless of what their sort of main focus is, they're still able to sell the vision and drive that forward, and all have that resilience quality, which you need, even if you're leading products, leading operations, leading sales, whatever, you still need to have it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like an impossible thing. Some of the best advice I think I got from other founders or mentors as I was building was like, this is going to be a long-term journey, and you just keep building, you just keep doing, you just keep at it, and something happens. And I think now, because of my new role as an advisor / fractional revenue leader for other founders, I find myself very much in VC conversations, like more than I used to, because obviously I raised and I had the relationship and it was done. Now I sit in like those conversations for other founders with VCs, and I realize more and more at the pre-seed to Series A, they're just looking at the founder and what kind of a person they are, and if this doesn't work, can they make something else happen? Can they pivot? Can they, do they have the stamina? Do they have the intellectual ability to figure out why this isn't working and able to figure out something else? Because they bet on the founder to do that. Like, if this doesn't work, they can make something else work. So if I give them some money, and if that money goes to almost, nowhere, I still can support them to build the next thing that they're going to do, At the early stage, I think it starts and stops with the founder. Really.
100%. Yeah. I've noticed the same thing. And we're raising at the moment for my own startup, and that's exactly the kind of underlying subtext of the conversations that I'm picking up on too. In the last few months that we've been kind of going for this raise pretty strong. That's clearly what's sort of behind a lot of the questions. Like, yes, there's obviously questions about the business, the market, etc. But it feels a lot more like the subtext behind it is poking at me, like and so I'm trying to learn to sell myself better.
Yeah, I mean, rather than testing the product or the market or the whatever, they're trying to test your knowledge or grasp of it, or your ability to navigate of the unknown. Like there's this really nice concept of what was it? It's preventative questioning versus, I forgot the other one, but it's. The idea is this, like, when they're asking you questions like, what about competitive advantage? What about moat? Like, all these things that are, supposed to drag you down, like, are you turning that conversation into a more visionary place? Like, that competitive advantage may not be there now, but we're going to build, or, while there's like a lot of competition in this space, we believe that this niche is underpenetrated or something like that. Like, are you able to have that mindset of, are you going into defensive mode, or are you actually like looking for opportunities, problem solving? And that's exactly what you do on a day-to-day basis, because when no one else is believing in you or your product, you have to believe in yourself and your product, and you have to do it every day. When you're getting, like, you're sending 500 messages and everyone's saying like, this is bullshit, you have to figure out, why are they saying, is it bullshit? Is it my messaging? Is it my product? And I come across this every day now. Like, a lot of founders, because the ones who don't have the go-to-market or sales experience hands-on, I'm working with this legal tech company. Like, the three co-founders are brilliant people, have been in the legal world forever. They're Oxbridge people, very smart, obviously, etc., but never been there, done that. So, when they can't put their finger on the problem, like, is it go-to-market? Is it our message? Is it not resonating? Is it the product which nobody needs? How do I figure out who needs this product? When you come across all those, like, can you dissect them into compartments, and can you figure out each one at the same time, unfortunately? So the VCs are looking at those abilities, I think, in very small meetings, like 30 minutes, 1 hour.
Yeah. You haven't got much of an opportunity to make that impression. I often use, I mean, they are sales calls. Like, this is the thing.
Absolutely.
And they are, and just like interviews are sales calls, like for a job. And the reason why I make that comparison is because I remember years ago when I used to work with a lot of, I used to give advice to a lot of young sales reps who were looking to try and interview and sort of climb up the ladder, etc. I just keep coming back to, you wouldn't approach a sales call the way you're approaching your interviews. Kind of like what you mentioned earlier. If you're asked a question like, can you tell me an example of when, I don't know, this, you don't just answer the question. You don't just you turn it around, like you said, and you use it as an opportunity. And I would always recommend that an answer to a question should ideally have like sort of a couple of components to it. You address the question with an example directly, and then you say something that helps them imagine you in the role.
Yeah.
So then you would say like, so if I'm fortunate enough to land this position, that means that I would implement X, Y, and Z, related to what you just said, in the role in order to achieve Y. And it makes them imagine you in the role in the same way you do in sales when handling objections. You say, okay, yeah, I totally understand that, but let me address that concern. And if we would be fortunate enough to work with you, then this is something that we would do. Is that a problem that you encounter? Right. And that's how you do it. And why would that be any different in a VC situation or investor conversation? And I think quite often, like you said, people get there's defensiveness and then there's nerves that come into play. It's like, why are you questioning my baby? But the way you've got to see it, I think, is to turn it around. And in fact, I think actually asking a follow-up question is a great way to do that, because then you start driving the narrative as well into the right direction. That's quite often the founders I work with. That's the kind of framework I try and take them through in a way of thinking. It's like mindset shift. You know what I mean? They're not the ones in control, nor are you. You both are. Just, you know what I mean? I think that helps.
It's a vetting process, but I think it's easy for us to say these things now that we've experienced and learned
100%.
Seen that and done that. Yeah. When you're trying to prove yourself for the first time, and a lot of people obviously. So, for example, there's a lot of bootstrapping hype going on right now, and on LinkedIn I see all the time like how a lot of like second time, third time founders are like, yeah, we bootstrapped to the hell out of this and we're going to the moon. And I'm like, yeah, but the first time you got some money because you didn't have any.
Yeah, because you had no idea how to sell.
Yeah, exactly. You had no idea how to sell. You made all the mistakes, and now you're like, yeah, I'm bootstrapping. Wonderful, good for you. But the first time founder or the people who've never done this before, they don't have that experience. They don't have that, unfortunately, confidence in front of the VC. Some of them have, some of them don't. But yeah, it's a two-way interaction. And obviously, when you're able to understand your own self-worth or the self-worth of your product and able to demonstrate that in a non-cocky way, non-arrogant way, I think you gain more respect, obviously.
Yeah. This whole hype, I mean, everything is hype in circles, right, in a way, but like, the whole bootstrap thing has left me pretty confused, because I'm like, because then I'll speak to some of these founders, I want to bootstrap, that's why we want to speak to you, that I'm like, okay, well, what do you know about, just some fundamental sales principles? And it's like, well, no, I don't know what any of that is. I'm like, well, you're not going to be able to bootstrap then, I'm sorry, but you can't. Like, raising investment is painful enough without getting bogged down in legal costs. That's why I'm using Founder Catalyst, today's sponsor for Peer, my startup's pre-seed raise. We've been lucky enough to have Sam, the CEO of Founder Catalyst, on the show before. Go and check out that episode. Their funding round service offers the most cost-effective way to produce funding round legals in the UK. It's just £1,495 excluding VAT, with no monthly fees or hidden extras, no matter how much you're raising. One Founder Catalyst customer recently raised 2.7 million and saved around £10,000 compared to the next option. If you're looking for SEIS, EIS Advanced Assurance, they've got a 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Founder Catalyst is built by founders for founders, and from my own experience, I can't recommend them enough. You can scan the QR code on the screen around here somewhere or around there somewhere, I don't know, or use the link in the description for 5% off. Thank you to Founder Catalyst for sponsoring this episode. Now back to it. You need to know these basics if you want to do it. So it's going to take you just as long, if not longer, than going down the investor route. So it's like, either way, it's hard. Like, that is the point. It's not like to say you're wrong for wanting to bootstrap or for raising money. It's just, don't think one is suddenly magically easier than the other. It's like building a business is fucking hard.
A lot of that early seed stage or pre-seed stage money is the runway to allow you to learn and make mistakes. Unfortunately, it's not to scale.
It's the breathing room.
And that's why I think now, like in what I do, I really love that, because obviously, like, you can get a salesperson, marketing person, whatever person, but now let's see if I can sell myself better. But I think that the benefit is obvious, which is I've done the mistake, so I'm going to save you from those. If anybody, so for example, I do a lot of pro bono or just equity-based work as well now with like pre-traction, pre-revenue startups, because I believe in their potential. So I'm trying to help them as much as possible to get somewhere, and then we can work together, etc. But they all come for the same reason. Like, you've been through the journey. This will help accelerate, my path to revenue, and I will hopefully avoid the mistakes because you've made the mistakes, or you know the people who've made the mistakes. And I think every VC now, there's a lot of conversation like who should get VC money, who should not, who should bootstrap. Not every product can, 10x, 3x, whatever. So do we all need the VC money. A lot of people need the money because they need to start, and they haven't been, they don't have generational wealth. They haven't been able to save as much. So of course VC funding is important, but the VC funding should also come with like advice and help the founder. And I think it really makes sense to work right now. For example, like some of my work comes through the VC relations I have, because they're like, these people are brilliant, but what they're missing, can you complement them with that? And obviously the founders love that.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I mean, that and it's a great way to sort of safeguard an investment as well, to make sure you've got expertise that goes along with it. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think, look, I mean, we're obviously a little bit biased, both being fractionals in this space, but I would say that, working on yourself as a founding team to be able to sell with the help of a coach or a fractional, something, or an advisor or mentor, something along those lines, I would say a much more sensible route than what I've seen a lot of people do, which is like, we've got the money, let's go and hire a head of sales, right? It's like, no, you've got nothing to give him. Like, and I've been that first hire. I've been that first. You probably have to. It does suck.
You're set up for failure almost 100%. 99% of the time.
Yeah, 100%. And then the founders just don't get why, and it's like, okay, you can't polish a turd. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
both parties shouldn't sign up to that, unfortunately.
No, I learned that lesson.
I think I've sort of done the same. Like just before Flowland, I was in a seed stage company going Series A. We helped raise, and I built the whole sales team from scratch. Like I was the first GM, the first person out of to internationalize, etc. And actually that triggered me to take action on being a founder myself, because if I'm staying awake for somebody else's product, maybe I can do the same for myself. But in that situation as well, it's like so much is unknown, and so much is dependent on the founder's charisma, their understanding of their market, their product. Like definitely having someone like transitionary in that period to figure the message market fit, to figure out like what is your real go-to-market channel, like what's your scalable channel, how should you go about it, what kind of person should you hire into it, and what are the non-scalable things you have to do every quarter. And a lot of salespeople, like I, for example, before doing my 2 startup roles previously, I didn't have that marketing understanding. For me, obviously I had like product marketing, webinars, outbound, whatever. But what I started selling with, what I was doing before Flowland, was a prop tech tool, and it was almost as smaller ticket size. And I did a lot of like marketing, like branding, PR, launches, all these things I had no idea about. As a salesperson, you're no longer just a salesperson. You're actually an everything person. You're an onboarding person. You're a GM, really. You're like a second hand to the founder. So I think working with somebody who can smoothen that transition to then say, this is the playbook, now we need a head of sales who's going to be able to be on top of this 5 people, 10 people large team, is definitely a better way towards success.
Yeah. And you don't see many of those people. And it's understandable. It's an incredibly complex thing to be able to do, because essentially what you're doing is you're trying to determine what the existing state of the sales engine is, whilst also predicting what it should be in a company that is going through a massive change to an extent where it can have ripple effects on what the product might be, what the customer base is, like everything. So it's like it's a moving, mutating organization that's asking you to figure out what the state of play is and what it should be. And that's a really difficult thing to do commercially, especially because there's so many threads commercially too. Like you said, marketing, branding, PR, sales, customer success, customer support, they're all interlinked in that way.
These new titles, like I like the idea of a founding AE, and that's something we wanted to try with Flowland as well. But at some point we decided we can't, it's not the time yet, maybe like after the seed stage of the company, which we're preparing towards. But still, it's someone generally who's been in a sales role in a scale up or something where, things were determined for them. They learned how to sell a product that exists for a niche or an ICP. But they haven't been in the making of it, and actually most of them won't have maybe the courage to say the right things for the founder to be aware of what needs to happen, because working with founders at those stages, like I've been in A, B, D, and in all of them, like working with a founder is always very difficult as well. Like Like, how do you speak with them without making them, feel a bit offended about their thing, or, like saying the right things, what's missing. The language around that is really difficult, and you have to have had the experience to be able to influence them in the right way. So now I really enjoy, especially like I'm having this conversation mostly with solo founders, because they don't have the person to bounce back and forth ideas. Like, if you're in the team of co-founders, you're going to make the mistakes together. That's fine, if it's your way. If you're working with someone like me as a solo founder, I think it's really cool because I can tell you, hopefully without offending you, what needs to happen. But you can't expect that from someone with a much more, junior experience. And I've seen that a lot of times, and those relationships break, and it's friction for everyone, and no 100%. One speaks good about each other when they depart.
And I've said this before too, but you also can't get that really just from full-time hires in general, right?
Exactly.
Because there's a fear there of, that they will pull their punches because they don't want to lose their job, right? So, quite often some people will say it directly, and fine, but ultimately I think it's very difficult for founders to get honest, very direct, real feedback, unfiltered thoughts, etc. Like, it's very difficult because once you're at that position, everyone's kind of kissing your ass a bit, to be honest. Like, that's kind of happening. Like, even if it's your childhood friend that you decided to co-found with, like, there's still a little bit of that's going to happen. They're going to pull their punches a bit.
Yeah, even between the co-founders, because like co-founder friction is always a big problem as well. It's often, I don't know what, I forgot the percentage, but it's like 40-50% of startup failure is due to co-founders breaking up and etc. Like, that friction, even your co-founder is not able to tell you. Like, they'll tell you what they think once or twice, but if they're not, like, they don't want to break the relationship, so you'll end up making probably the wrong decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a minefield, isn't it, what we do? It really is. But it is also, I think, I can tell, obviously, the reason we enjoy doing it is very similar. It's the puzzle piece, but the human aspect of it, I think, is the bit that I love the most. Being able to, like you said, be that support for someone that you didn't have. You know what I mean? Like, when you started out, like, and just,
I do certainly love that. I think what I really love is the aspect of growth, like figuring out like those, like, how do we grow? Yeah. And it's a ridiculous challenge I give myself over and over. But then I love doing that with people I enjoy working with, and having the opportunity to choose that mutually right now in this point in my life is a blessing. So in that aspect, I do agree with you in the human aspect. But for me, the main driver, that's why I'm kind of like, I'm working with legal tech, a gamification app right now, a fintech. Because at this stage, the early stage, the fundamentals are very similar. Like, I've seen it as an employee, as an IC, as a manager, and being a founder. The things you need to do, I've actually written the playbook now, like from 0 to 3 millionaire are like 20 steps of what you need to do. And of course, depending your industry, you will pick and choose different growth channels, etc. But at the same time, message market fit, building trust authority, scaling that trust and authority is something that's really difficult because your first network depletes, and then you have to go beyond that. Like, these are things you have to do in every industry, regardless of what you're selling. So I really enjoy seeing how that, like, for example, now I'm onboarding a new client where she's building a technology for energy companies, like hardware. And the reason she wants to work with me is basically like, I sell to my first 5-10 customers through the network effect, but I really love what you did with Flowland, which is scaling that beyond your first network. Like, how do you build credibility, trust, authority with people you don't know, which then shortens your sales cycle? I think that is the most difficult thing of the early stage.
So how do you do it? What's your secret sauce?
I think it is learning from, so I think I really am very like team YC playbook in this, like do the things that don't scale. So I think it's as simple as 2 or 3 things. One, thinking that you have in the early stage the luxury to do non-scalable things. So if it is like doing private dinners with 20 people, if you have a population of 1,000 enterprise that you want to sell to, figure out like who's the 100 you can reach out first, and then get them to dinners, like do the webinar that they care about, do the event they care about, like be very persona focused, versus If your thing is like a $5,100 subscription product, and you just need the volume, then you can do what we did with Flowland, which is basically get the experts who are sales experts, have them co-write blogs with you every month, like have 100, 200 experts share their opinions with you in a blog, and then make them share that with their population. So the logic is like, figure out who's the influencer, the people you can create trust with, and then multiply that in your industry, which then in go-to-market terms is really a lot of people, what they do is they build a product, they send 500 messages thinking that it will scale. No, it doesn't, because outbound without inbound, which is what I've been explaining, like the thing that will bring people to your door, the trust, the credibility, the authority, the expertise that you put out there, needs to be together with the outbound. That's what creates the flywheel.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's how you get to your first 100 customers. And I think beyond the first 100 customers, then at that point, it's been 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, and you figured out, okay, this is my message market fit. This is more or less my ICP. This is who I sell to. So now I can start paying into scalable channels, like your SEO at that point will pick up. So for example, for us, it was 1 year of building incredible content, making the right partnerships, having the backlinks into our website, which generated traffic from 1,000 to 10,000. And then those scalable things start picking up, and you start seeing like 5, 6 demos a day in the HubSpot. Hopefully you start doing paid ads, because you know that once you put the ad dollar, it will bring something.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
If you do that before too much, you're just burning cash.
Yeah, you've not proven your messaging
exactly.
or anything else. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What's your stance on, and this is a very selfish question I'm going to ask because of my startup and kind of my passion, I guess, within sales as a whole. But what's your stance on sort of learning and development with sales personnel, with salespeople, sort of coaching, sort of mentoring, and the sort of monitoring of specific skill sets within sales individuals and teams?
Yeah, I think so. I would have 3 different answers to this question. If I think about my whole sales career, it's been more like large teams, enterprise, Series D plus, established, and salespeople required to just own their quota and sell. And a lot of them are in that business, in that job for that. They don't want to mess with like marketing, product, onboarding. A lot of them will be like, I sold, here, hand over, customer success, which I think is very old school. So for learning those skills, it's a combination of, I'm a big believer in like mimicking what works. Why reinvent the wheel? So it's like learning from people who are already selling. We're learning, like always shadowing, as we say in sales language, like shadow, and then like monthly stand-ups for knowledge sharing. What works? Case study, client testimonials, bringing out people from other parts of the business like customer success, marketing, all telling their success stories and just learning through that. And then obviously, like every quarter, you might have your 1 day off where you might bring in like external parties to hone in on something like pipeline building or how to do better, like managing your own territory, etc. But I think it's really like mimicking what works internally. That's probably always been the most helpful for me and for the teams that I've run. In terms of something earlier stage, like pre-seed to Series B, where you don't have the resources, everything is super like fluid from one day to another, everything can change. Then I think it's like staying next to the founder and like just like, again, mimicking or trying to learn from them, like booking time to figure out like how they're selling their own product. There's a reason why we say founder-led sales needs to be done by the founder in the early days. And the founders, unfortunately, a lot of them that I've seen, they leave the job of recording or creating playbooks to when the first hire is coming or after, unfortunately. Too late. Like,
yeah.
Right now, for example, when I work with people, they're like, should we be spending more time on maybe like, like sending out more emails or just going to more events and etc.? Yes, But at the same time, you should be spending time on recording whatever it is that you're doing that's not working or working. Every Friday, you should be recording your learnings, because otherwise you're just in this like a mouse in the hamster in the wheel, just trying to repeat the same thing, and when in an anxious mode. Taking the time to record those learnings as a founder is your job, and is your present to yourself and to your team for them to do a better job. Yeah, and the third point I was going to mention is now AI as per usual. And so, for example, one of the startups that I advise, as it's also a friend of mine, I've been following his journey from the get-go. It's called UG AI. And in the early days, they were very focused on building AI-based learning modules per business outcome for different departments. Recently, they focused very much on sales and customer success a lot. So, for example, taking what's existing in the learning material of the company and putting it into an AI, which then gives you a learning journey, it can shorten your onboarding from anywhere 4 or 5 months to 2 months. That's at least what they're seeing with their clients. So maybe integrating a bit of AI-driven things to your learning can also accelerate that.
I love everything you just said there, because it's exactly my line of thinking. You kind of said in the first part there about when working with enterprise level scale ups, I guess, share what works. And I was thinking, yes, but you need to identify what works first, which you then came on to, and that is, I think, the thing that I see not being done the most. To be honest, for the reasons you said, there's not that the awareness or the drive or anything to do what you said, of exactly. Stopping once a week and sitting down and going, right, what worked this week or what didn't. There isn't that. It's just and also there isn't the time, or at least there's the perception that there isn't the time, where it is very important to make that time and to prioritize that, because you need to be cataloging what is and is not working. I say things as I actually advise a lot of the founders I work with to do a founder diary. So first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, or whenever, have it. I just say make a Google Doc. Bookmark it on the front page of your phone, with a shortcut. And anytime you do anything, any learning, anything at all that pops into your head, put it in your diary, right? And it can be free form, it can be bullet point, it can be whatever. Speak to your phone, dictate it, whatever. It doesn't matter, any and everything, because then it's in a format that you can search. You can use AI to pull out insights. You can do whatever. You can use it for blog posting. You can use it for LinkedIn content. But most importantly, you can search up every time you said the word sell or sale or messaging or something, and you can pull it out. And that is the foundation of your sales playbook, your operational playbook, your marketing playbook. It's the foundation of everything. I'm like, do it every day, because it's so valuable, and it takes a couple of minutes a day, a couple of minutes every couple of hours, whatever. It's like, but that is so valuable, because all too often I've been in that position before, where I've joined those teams, been that first sales hire, the first sales leader, whatever it is. I'm like, what have we got? Nothing. I'm like, you haven't even recorded your sales calls. You haven't even made notes in your CRM. I don't know what you said that worked. You know what I mean? I don't know what emails worked, what didn't. Like, how the hell do you expect? Now I need to do this from scratch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Now I see that a lot with marketing teams, because the last 2-3 years, my job has been really scaling what works. So I've kind of developed that, maybe on top of the sales skill set, a bit more on the marketing side of things. And the first thing I try to do is ICP persona, and it's everyone thinks it's fluffy, etc. It's the most fundamental thing. And I see marketing people, people writing content or blogs, haven't listened to a single client call. Why are you doing yourself, why are you torturing yourself? If you listen to a client call, or 8 of them, then you know exactly who are the 3 persona you're selling to. You know exactly what they want to hear from you, and your whole content calendar and your blog post can be shaped on that. And then on top of it, put a little bit of Google search and maybe a SEMrush or something cheaper, the keywords. Then you do yourself a favor of actually accelerating lead generation, qualified lead generation. And people are doing that job without having listened to or been in a single sales call. And I'm like, how is this even possible? So I see that now on the other side, in the demand generation side of things, the same mistake.
Absolutely, yeah, and I've seen it for a while too. I mean, that's why you hear so many stories of founders, horror stories. Let's say of founders talking about how they've engaged with agencies for outsourced SDR services, cold emailing, cold calling,
It's the
marketing, and it's always
one.
and it's always it never worked. They
Never
ripped us
worked.
off. It's like, well, what did you give them?
Yeah.
Because if I've heard the stories where it worked because the founding team systematically logged everything, so they handed over a perfect, like near perfect early stage playbook and says, this is what we found out that works well so far. We need you to just scale that.
Yeah.
That's when it works.
Yeah.
And that's why these guys are in business, because it does work, but you need to give them something. They can't figure it out for you. That's your job.
I think the thing that's been the most annoying for me throughout my career was always been a full cycle resource, even as like a leader. Like my job was to make those warm connections for my team, right? And so Outbound has been a big part of like I've never been really handed over like, here is a ripe opportunity for you.
Right.
Sorry, is it the ripe is?
Yeah, ripe. Yeah.
Ripe opportunity for you. Go and just close. Maybe it happened once or twice, which was amazing. But most of the cases, it's not that. So what you need to do is definitely like figure out your own way to generate business, which is why I like sales. As I said in the beginning, like it's like you're the general manager of your own territory. You're in charge. You're like a mini founder or mini business owner in your own right. But a lot of people, unfortunately, don't see it like that, and it's very annoying. Yeah.
But the thing is, that's fine. But you still need to be given something to start with. If someone says to me, right, we need you to build an outbound process to generate, for this, to sell X product. But okay, cool. Who am I selling it to? What are the key messages that have worked? What's the main value propositions? There's a list of things that you and I would need to know in order to do that. Yeah. And if someone turns around and says we're not really sure, it's going to say, okay, well, it's going to be a good 6 to 8 months before we figure it out then.
Yeah. But that's the thing with like all these outbound agencies. And as I was saying in the beginning, like the one thing that I've learned in the last 5 or 6 years of working mostly in early stage startups is that like outbound doesn't work on its own. Outbound and inbound work together, and they create the virtuous cycle, the flywheel, if you will. And that's a combination of yesterday. So for example, I was talking to an SDR who was prospecting me for something. And in the end of the conversation, he really enjoyed the chat. And he's like, can you just give me some tip about what I need to do and etc. And I said, just be your own brand. Start writing like your LinkedIn posts and why. That is what I mean by inbound. Like that is why I mean by building your own credibility and expertise. And he's like, we've been trying LinkedIn, but it's not really working really well. Like, how are you doing it? Well, marketing is giving me something to post, and he's posting things like very high-level concepts and like philosophical things. And I'm like, just record what I asked you in this call and write your answers to those questions in your own words and start posting that, and let's meet again, because that's how you build your authority and trust. And somebody who is in your prospect list will be following you, they'll be seeing that, and then they'll be booking a meeting with you. So now you turn the table, and once you know why they booked that call with you, what customer journey they have been through, how they figured it out, how they found you, then you scale that. And that's when you start growing.
And that's another, I think, common mistake too, is that not enough people ask why, right? So it's like, oh yeah, okay, we're interested to buy from you. Cool. Why? Yeah. Okay, we're not interested to buy from you. Okay, cool. Why? Like, very simple. Very, very simple thing to do, as opposed to, or, we decided to no longer join the demo call, or actually we've decided we're not interested in booking that discovery call. Okay, why? Like, they're really simple. It's a really simple question to ask, but and it's probably the most effective, because then you can change that. You're not getting anyone to discovery call stage, which is the first stage. Find out why.
Again, and record them. Like, I think it's objection handling 101, and like, any objection is and that we don't want and why is in my book. It's an objection handling. And I think like I go into these situations where people don't have a wiki, they don't have a Notion page, they don't know they have not recorded a single thing about why they're being rejected, and it's happening over and over. So starting with like asking those questions. I think the reason they're not, and then recording, but I think the reason they're not always asking the question is that comes with a level of confidence as well. Yes. Like being able to ask the why question and it comes from a genuine place of curiosity. So sometimes they're like, oh, you're not buying from me, let's move to the next call,
Yeah, which is understandable. I mean, and that, I think, it's confidence which comes with experience, right? I mean, once you've done this for long enough. I mean, we all started like that early on. I'm sure you did. I know I did. When people said, "No, leave me alone," whatever. Like, okay, yeah, sorry to disturb you. Have a good day. Whereas, as I got more experience, I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I get it. But before I let you go, would you kill me if I ask you one last question?
Yeah.
It's just it's a small thing, but it makes, and then suddenly, you turn it around, you learn a lesson, whatever. But yeah, it's not easy. It's easy for us to talk about with the power of hindsight.
Just maybe for the listeners, this might be a useful tip that I started using back in my own startup, and now I implement it with everyone. It works every time. Like when you're doing like LinkedIn messaging or email messaging, and before you exit the conversation, always put down like, what are the top 3 reasons you think people are not buying from you, and just put them as like 1, 2, 3. Like, okay, great, you're not buying from me, not in those words, but may I kindly ask like 1, 2, 3, like, is it not the right time?
Is it because of this, or this?
Is it because of this? And generally they'll be like 2, 3, whatever, or other, if they're going to answer. And they do answer a lot. And I do a lot of A/B tests around this now. And just make it easy for people to answer. Like, don't give them cognitive load. Don't give them like don't write them like this big email and
right. Yeah. Can you give me a 3-page essay as to why you didn't want to buy from me? It's just like, yeah, exactly. Just like, yes or no. Is it this, or this?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, we've come to the end of part 1, but we'll be jumping in part 2 in a minute for us, but for those listening and watching in a couple of days. So for those watching, listening, etc., you're going to have to subscribe, notification bell and all that, because to find out when we upload part 2. But I want to delve into the third part of the thing you talked about there in a little bit more detail as well, which was the AI part, because that's a really interesting thing, obviously very directly related into what I'm doing to some extent as well, and sort of how that's influencing sales. So we'll dive into that in a minute for us. So that's end of part 1.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.